Hey guys, on today's episode of Convicted Mindset, we're with Cory Chipp. She is the founder of probably the coolest, best looking, best feeling, I can tell you because my wife wears them, women's apparel on the planet, leggings, sports bras, etc. It's a beautiful product. She's a beautiful individual inside and out. She's going to walk you through her entrepreneur journey. I call this episode Therapy Thoughts. I think a lot of times some of the thoughts that we have in our head, we don't know where to place them. She walks you through where some of those thoughts can be placed and what she's learned, not only in her own journey with therapy, but also her entrepreneurship journey. Stay tuned. We'll see you soon, friends. What's going on, everybody? Happy Friday. I am here with, hands down, the best looking guest we've ever had on the show. And I say that kindly because I know her personally and she doesn't take that offensively. But Cory is somebody who, truth be told, for everybody listening, Cory and I kind of went through round one, and I think both of us agreed that there was a lot more to what she could really offer the audience. And so we put together some pretty rad talking points and some pretty interesting things from her perspective, from a female's perspective on the entrepreneur journey. And I think that's something that we really haven't dived into here on this channel. And I know that there's a lot of you out there, a lot of you gals that send us a ton of messages. How do I get started? Who do I look to? You know, where do I go for funding? How do I deal with it when it's a male-dominated industry, right? All of the kind of questions that we get. And so Cory Chipp is the founder of a company called Gold Elite. And it's out of Salt Lake City, Utah. And it's a women's wear clothing line. I don't want to just isolate it to just the fantastic leggings that my wife wears or the great sports bras. There's so much more to it than that. And so for me, I would really call it a movement. What she's done and accomplished with social media and the way that she's turned her following into loyalists and the way that she's able to connect. That's what I'm hoping that everybody gets out of this. So Cory, I'm stoked that you're here. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm stoked. So a couple of things that I want to start with is really just authenticity and vulnerability. And I think for me personally, I had this conversation yesterday with a gentleman at lunch. When I start with, hey, life was good for me, life was great for me, had the tiger by the tail, and then 2007 happened and I got kicked in the teeth and faced an indictment to go to prison. People kind of go, whoa, right? And so when I look at you, if I didn't know you, everything looks great and rosy on social, right? It's 15 seconds of perfection. And so how do you start with, how do you use in a positive light those flaws or the stories, the adversity to connect with others?
So in my experience, when I haven't shared my vulnerabilities with my audience, they're a little bit more disconnected. I always was showing photo shoots, behind the scenes, all the fun things about being an entrepreneur. But in the day-to-day, I wasn't having fun. And I finally got on Instagram and I was like, guys, I'm struggling. And the community and outreach that I had of people connecting with me and wanting to talk about their problems and relate, it was so nice. Even as I do a podcast like this, it's really important that I say, hey, I'm nervous if I lose my breath. It's because I have anxiety. Sometimes, like yesterday, I had anxiety so bad it felt like I was being chased by a bear for no reason. I go to therapy, I do all the things, and I still struggle with anxiety, and I have ADHD. So I'm a business owner that has a stereo going on in the background of her head. That's how it feels. So as long as I am vulnerable and tell people, they laugh and give me a platform for forgiveness because I'm going to make a mistake. And when I do, they think it's almost cute. And they're like, oh, okay. She's able to be vulnerable. Because most people don't talk publicly. So doing that in itself, people know is nerve-wracking.
Totally. And I think the vulnerability is what, I don't know if it was COVID and 2 years of separation. I don't know if it was because all of our favorite watering holes and gyms were closed down. Maybe it was all the above, but I think people are really looking for a connection right now.
Absolutely. A community to fit into.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So as you've told your story, you've you've kind of created what I would call a safe space. And I think that that's been one of the things that you've done super well, especially on social media, showing the process, whether it's your little ones being involved, whether it's the grind at the gym, whether it's the hectic schedule from photo shoot to pop up, back home to shipping. I think that that's super important for people to see that real journey, because most of the time it's just like a 30-second highlight reel.
Mhm.
And so as you've gone to therapy, which I love, as you've kind of learned about yourself, which I think is super important if you want to create yourself a better human, and be a better partner and be a better business owner. So how do you create this safe space, not only for yourself to make mistakes, but for other people who you come in contact with?
So I think what I start with is I go to therapy.
Mm,
So I think that that's the number one thing I recommend to anybody, to anyone, but especially somebody trying to manage a business, and not just any therapist, a therapist that is specialized in high performance individuals, because you can't get high performance therapy from a Christian, or no offense to religion, but it's just a completely different type of therapy, which I think that both are beneficial. But so in my experience with therapy, what's that has created for me is a safe space. I can
mm,
talk about whatever I want, whenever I want, with no judgment. She even is like almost my therapist. Her name is Denise. She's like my business advisor. Like, I talk to her weekly about my business. Not that I'm like, it's just good to get her advice and her professional opinion. So that's what therapy, I think people need to understand, is that it's all therapy is a safe space for you to say what you need to say with no judgment. So
love that.
I think without me understanding that I had that safe space, I wasn't able to create it for other people. Like, I felt like, oh, why are they pouring their problems on me? Or, you know what I mean? Like, and I don't pour my problems on people, because I know that once a week on Wednesday, I'm going to be able to process that. And slowing down has actually helped me so much, because normally I would have called my sister and been like, oh, this is what's going on. Now I, process it, wait to talk to my therapist. And honestly, by the time I go to talk to her, I've usually worked through it in such a less reactive way. So that's been like such a good thing for me to have that safe space.
I love that, especially as you're going to deal with all the things that come your way as an entrepreneur, dealing with the unknown on a daily basis as soon as you wake up and check your email, right? But one of the things that you mentioned was slowing down, which I love. I told a buddy of mine the other day who's really got some rapid growth in his company going on. Sometimes you have to slow down to speed up, and I think that that's
Absolutely.
super important. Now, I shared a couple weeks ago a thought. I didn't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to do it now. And I used it when I spoke in Nashville. And I really, it struck me because it was something that was really relative to my childhood and is present in my life. And so it helped me. And I'm hoping it can help other people. And you had said that one of the things that you were taught was that you can have two conflicting thoughts and they can both be true at the same time. You'll probably say it much more eloquent than I am, but expound, tell the people about that. What does that mean?
I actually heard you say it and I was like, wow, that was way better articulated than I said the first time. So, and thank you for sharing that. I'm so glad that that resonated with you and you were able to share that, because it has been such a game changer for me. I can, so two conflicting thoughts. It actually started with my mom. So my mom is, in my childhood, she did her best, but that doesn't always mean it was good enough. Um, and she's an amazing grandma. I was having a hard time separating those two. So I would get in therapy and I'd be like, she does this to me. And I feel like, my inner child wounds that I hadn't healed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, but she does this for my kid. And like, so my therapist was actually, she was like, two things can be true. And there's obviously way more than two things, but and I was like, hey, you know what? That is true. Or even that she did her best as a child and that wasn't good enough. I can give her the grace of, hey, mom, you did your best. But that doesn't mean that as a child, that was enough for me. And I think being able to separate, like, hey, you can love me and still mess up, or I think that has just been like such a game changer for me to understand.
I love that. And it was true of not of my mom, but of my dad in that same spot. You know, I say it all the time. I don't have a father figure that is somebody that you would look up to. You know, a lot of people go, oh, you know, my dad's my hero, or, you know, I mean, you know, yeah, not in this situation. So it's a difficult juxtaposition to go, man, how do you celebrate somebody for, you know, giving you life and creating what you have? At the same time, you want them to have that good space with your children. At the same time, you're kind of a dirtbag to me,
Now you're like an
right?
adult and you can see, and
Yeah,
it's confusing almost.
very confusing. Adulting gets very confusing. And I think the older you get, the more you have, and this probably happens with you with therapy, like you probably, the deeper you dive, you're like, okay, so all of these things don't have to be true.
Mm-hmm.
I can unlearn a lot of what I was taught, and that can be healthy. That can be okay.
For sure.
And I think that's really where, for me, it's like showing up. I know that's something for you that you like to talk about. But when I show up for people, like knowing who I am inside, knowing like, okay, my go-to is always like, I'm gonna fix it. I'm gonna fix everything. That's how I grew up. That's my mantra. That's how I run my businesses. Fix, 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 fix. Not emotional, just fix. So how has what you've learned allowed you to show up not only for yourself, to be validated? Because I know that's uncomfortable sometimes. You know, when people go, oh, Cory, you're this or you're that, or I saw, like, it's a little uncomfortable,
Yeah.
right? It's still uncomfortable for me. And sometimes I always have this Brene Brown quote in the back of my head where she says, don't shrink and don't puff up.
I
And
love
that's
that.
tough for me. It's tough for me just to sit there. So how has what you've learned, you know, allowed you to show up not only for yourself and say, this is who I am, gosh darn it, and I've busted my butt to get here and I deserve these accolades. And then how do you show up for others?
So I think that showing up right now has just recently been easy for me. Up until then, I don't think, especially when I started my entrepreneur journey, I come from an area that's a little bit more rough around the edges. I get thrown into this entrepreneur world as this beautiful white woman who's supposed to act a certain way, but that's not, I don't even speak like that. So I'm uncomfortable. I'm not fitting in. I'm getting corrected in public by the way I'm speaking. So I didn't know how to show up. I didn't even feel like I could talk like myself. And I would leave those rooms and I would feel like, okay, like I did what I needed to do, but like, do they really know who I am? And then I'm engaging in my community and they love me. And it's really me. They're seeing me on real Instagram. And I'm like, I'm not even pitching like your business, you know, they can feel if it's you or who you're trying to be. And I think that what my therapist has taught me is your story is your testimony. You do not need to be embarrassed about it. And if it wasn't for that, you wouldn't be who you were. Like
Mhm.
you wouldn't be as strong as you were. You wouldn't be as scrappy. So when an entrepreneur, that's all of these skills and like things that I thought were negative traits have taken me far in my business. So just being able to realize like I'm not embarrassed. And at that time I was doing my best. I always was. I had a child at 16. So that put me into a place where I graduated a year early. I always had a job. Just I did my best, but that still doesn't mean that, you know, I didn't make mistakes and that was good enough.
Yeah,
So
yeah, exactly. And I think that's so it's interesting, right? As you kind of go through that journey and that process, as we grow up, I don't know about you, but there's so many things, I'm sure we can list them, but like when our generation, you're not supposed to talk about how much money you make, right? You're not supposed to talk about this. You're not supposed to ask people about that. We don't talk about religion. You don't, like, kind of just like these check boxes of like, hey, stay within these guidelines of conversation and you'll be safe, right?
mhm.
And I think that's what's interesting as you grow up and you're like, well, if I go outside these bounds and I start to learn about people, maybe I learn more about myself, and maybe that's a good thing. And as I start to question myself, maybe I'm not questioning negatively, maybe I'm questioning positively, right? And I start to reinforce some of the beliefs I have or the reasons I do things.
Mhm.
So I love when I say it all the time, like the old school, like, and he's still there now, but like the old school Joe Rogan podcast where you could literally listen to them and challenge your own thoughts. I think in today's world, we're really kind of following the people who agree with us, who look like us, who talk like us, who, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's like this perfect avatar. We probably talked about that in your marketing. So this ideal human. But for me, it's like, okay, how do you accept somebody or yourself in the present moment imperfectly, like as they are right now?
I think as long as you're really working on yourself, that's easier. Like, and if you're working on yourself, doing the self work, taking time to like keep the promises to yourself. I think that we break promises to ourselves the most because,
Mm,
like, for me, everyone's needs have to come before mine. The kids have to come before me. So if their stuff comes, it's priority to me. And then I'm tired. And it's like I give myself that excuse. And so I really tried to keep those promises to myself always and just do my self work because that's, in my opinion, the most important thing. Like, nobody around me, I feel like I'm the only one like pulling everybody up. So as high as I go, everyone else comes. And I see that both of my business partners have started therapy, which is it's going to impact our business in a positive way because even just them individually and then us being able to come together and give each other more grace and understanding. And I'm not saying I'm not taking accountability for doing it, but because I went and they saw the positive changes, that inspired them to do the same.
yeah, I would agree with that. I love that you kind of surround yourself with birds of a feather. So you talked about self-care. What is your self-care routine that you're willing to share? What are some things that are kind of like your non-negotiables to make sure that your cup is full?
So I always do my gratitude journal, meditate. I'm pretty big with self care. Last year, my best friend passed away and I got depressed. Like, I wasn't even sure that depression was a real thing until experiencing it. So when you said you have to slow down to speed up, I had to slow down for almost a year because I was grieving so bad I couldn't pick myself back up. So when that was happening, I really wasn't showing up for myself, going to the gym. I was doing just giving an excuse because I was sad, not realizing I was like perpetuating my depression. So I go to therapy once a week. It is a non negotiable for me. Even so, this week, 30 minutes in, I didn't, sometimes you feel like you complain the whole time. I asked her, I was like, can you give me feedback? Like, I want you to tell me like what you think is my therapist, what you think I need to work on. And I think that feedback from people that I trust is that's a big self-care for me because I know that it's coming from a place of love. Because as an entrepreneur, I think I'm the boss, right? Like I don't have a
Yeah,
time. I get to do whatever I want. So just people to keep me in check is part of my self-care as well.
I like that. I like that. Um, let's switch directions here. Let's talk about the mindset. Here I say it all the time. In order to make a real change in life, you have to be convicted or committed. If you really want to change, the way that you think or the way your body looks or the dollars in your bank account, you can't just have one foot in, one foot out. So walk through the difference between what you've learned, mindset wise, front of the brain, back of the brain. Walk people through some tips there.
So our brain is so old. It's like this giant computer that we're used to, like in our back of the brain, it protects us. It's like, imagine it like a manager and a protector. You have two little, your conscious or your subconscious. You can call it that. So in the back, you have people like protecting you. Oh, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? And then your manager is the way you react. Everybody has different managers and react, but they're all in the back of your brain. It means that you need to get the blood flow to the front of the brain so you can think clearly and process in that frontal cortex. The back brain is scary thoughts like, oh, like I'm going to fall, I'm going to do this, which protect you. But when you get to the front of the brain, that's when things process. I am the worst back brain thinker ever because my whole life I've been in fight or flight.
Yeah.
So I am like I walk into a room, I'm looking at the doors, like right, like that's, and I have to stop and think like you're back braining right now and talk to myself openly, like, why are you doing this? What's going on in this? So I have different people that I have open dialect within my head. I have complete names for them. Like the mean me is Meredith. Like I have all these funny things, but it's from therapy. So I can even go and like talk to my inner child and be like, oh yeah, like I am doing okay. Because my inner child would be so proud of me right now. And the highest version of me, I have that like look down on me and are you intentionally living like the way this person you're going to become? Are you being that right now? And I talk to these things. I like to make up scenarios in my head about my boyfriend. I'm the worst. And I have to ask myself, like, is there a real cause for this? Or is this my back brain firing?
Mm. That's interesting. That's interesting. How do you kind of reset that? How do you change that process?
I would totally show you, but I'm just going to explain it really good. So what you do is you sit in a chair and you get your knees straight, and it's all about blood flow to the brain. So what we're trying to do is push the blood flow back to the front of the brain. When your fight or flight kicks in, it like clamps off the nerve that pushes the blood flow to the front. So that's why even in a nervous situation, when you're not really nervous, sometimes you're not thinking clearly, right? So if you tip over and you take the top of your head parallel to your legs for 7 to 10 seconds, you breathe, you sit up, and you breathe out as slow as possible with that full diaphragm breath. And it forces blood flow to turn your nerves back on in your front brain. So you can do that up to 3 times. And if you sit there for a few minutes, within 7 minutes, your whole entire nervous system is reset and your nerves are properly functioning.
No kidding.
Yeah, I do it all the time.
Middle of a meeting, you're just like, and I'm out.
It's because I get anxiety. So I think that, and maybe it's a little bit of the placebo effect even. I'm like, oh, tip upside down and my anxiety can go away.
Really?
So, yeah.
I love that. I love that. Just a little technique that'll make you feel a little bit better.
Yes.
So changing directions here, a little social media for everybody. For anybody that goes to find you, Gold Elite, and starts to follow you. You've worked very hard to build this brand, to make, I mean, literally, I remember the first day that we met, I was like, holy cow, whoever does, I think I even said that out loud to you, or maybe in text or in writing. I said, whoever does your brand, like, it's just spot on with your message. And you were like, oh, that's me. So it really is, it's impeccable. And I know that so many people struggle with what we would call imposter syndrome. I'm just starting out, I'm too young, I'm a female, whatever it might be, right? I have this vision of myself in my head that doesn't meet my current state. And I feel like I'm not worthy to put it out there to the world. Have you dealt with that? And if so, how do you overcome that?
Oh my gosh, I deal with that all the time. And I think the best way for me to overcome it is with my kindness. I have gotten so far with me being kind and even helping other people, like they call competitors. I don't view anyone as my competitor. Has really paid off for me. And just inviting people to other events, inviting that. And I think it's probably like karma, it's that full circle. But I always encourage like people who are younger, older, just starting their business, and invite them and treat them the exact same. Like I don't treat anybody differently. And I'm honestly probably nicer to someone who's just starting out because I respect the hustle and grind so much. But I think that, I still struggle with imposters. It's hard not to when you sit in these rooms and, I'm like, yeah, I have one business, you guys have 30. Like, know that sitting in the room, right? And even as a woman, like I always joke to my dad that I'm playing in the game with the big boys. So when I call him crying, he tells me, you signed up for this.
Yeah.
So I think, just honestly being kind has really gotten me. the furthest.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. And so I think it's super interesting just being able to kind of turn this on its head, because the people that I get to talk to, these big monsters who have these big followings, it's so interesting because they're now so popular because they were so real. And polarizing or not, right or wrong, doesn't really make a difference, but really finding your niche. And that's what I've loved, really exploring for people. So dealing with imposter syndrome, I don't know if it ever goes away. I think, like you said, especially someone like yourself or people who are listening, one day you're in this room, and then it's the moment you feel comfortable, you're now going to be in a different room where you're uncomfortable again.
Mhm.
It never changes. It really doesn't. So the moment you go, oh yeah, I can deal with this. I can step on this stage. I can talk with these gals. And then they're like, hey, you did well. We'd like to invite you too. And you're like, oh boy, now I'm nervous.
Yeah.
Doesn't go away. And so I think that's, for me, I always want to just tell these people that are listening, like, don't stand in front of the cars that aren't yours and the houses that aren't yours. And don't follow these 15 or 30-second highlight reels that are just screaming at you, telling you that there's the 7 steps to success. And it's not true. It's just not true. Like, and if you really need somebody to call you and to yell at you and to swear at you on a daily basis, like, there's a problem here.
Mm.
You don't need a coach. You probably need a therapist.
Oh, for sure. And you shouldn't be running a business if you can't be accountable.
Definitely. And it's like the people that you surround yourself with, right? It's very interesting. And so I remember a statement long ago, and I don't know who said it, but I'm sure they'll tell us in the comments, is like, if you treated everybody you met as though they just went through a major life event, you'll probably be correct 80% of the time.
Yeah.
And so that kindness that you talked about, how do you kind of translate that as you're meeting with people from the therapy perspective? Everybody's going through something.
Oh my gosh. I just got the chills, like, as you were saying that. Like, I don't think I realized it until I lost my friend, you don't understand it until you're experiencing it. So I believe I needed to experience that, because if I didn't, I would have never truly been able to understand my own community of women. Because until you feel that loss, you can't understand. So I didn't only feel that loss, I felt depression, I felt all the things. It just hit me. But now I'm looking back at it, and anybody that I run into that is kind of mean, I look and I'm like, oh, maybe they're going through something. My son, my boys were in bed by 8 p.m. because they were just having a tough day. And instead of yelling at them, I'm like, hey, you probably had a bad day. And I was able to process, like, everybody's going through something. I heard something in one of my podcasts. The lady that I listen to, she speaks all over the country, and she heard it from her mentor. So what she did was she went in and gave everybody a blank piece of paper, and anonymously they wrote the most traumatic thing they were going through in that moment, and they passed it up. And she said it was like the most humbling experience to read, and it was all anonymous, but she read a few of them out loud. Just lost a baby, dealing with the miscarriage. My husband died 3 months ago. And she said that she'll never not start her programs or masterminds, whatever she speaks at, with that, because she said she could feel the energy in the audience. They were like, oh, like, they connected right there. She just connected every person in that room, because we're all going through something. And we all, as adults, can comprehend, like, oh yeah, like, maybe I didn't have a miscarriage, but I just lost my mom, or I lost my best friend. And just that connection with other people we need that as humans. And I'm so honored to be able to connect with so many people that feel like they can tell me. People just tell me all their crazy stuff. And I'm always like, I'm so glad you felt safe saying that, but I think you need a therapist.
It is so true. It's very interesting. So as you know, on most Fridays, I get to go inside the prison system somewhere in America. And it's always been my thing, like, to fill up my cup that last day of the week on purpose. And as crazy as that sounds, I've had more blessings come from, going into the belly of the beast and getting a perspective from people, like you said, with literally writing those things on paper. These are people I'm face to face with, 15 years for this charge, life for that charge, given an attempted murder at the age of 15, rape, the whole nine. It's like when you leave there, and I don't know if you ever felt this, but as people tell you stuff, when you leave there, it's like you look at yourself. I look at myself in the car and you go, I have no problems. The depth of perspective.
And I always think about just, because I have a lot of friends in the prison system, and that's kind of the lifestyle I was raised in. And I look at it and I'm like, you're not better than them. You were just one decision, or not even maybe just being caught differently. So yeah. I think that's just such a great point. I love that you do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a story that just rocked my world, and I've been in hundreds of them, and this one just crushed me. And this gal, the women are always different for me. The men, I can usually tell them to like get their crap together, but the women have some tough stories and challenges and childhoods, etc. And this one gal that I was in front of, she came home. She was raised on the East Coast in a certain religion, and then he moved her out west and to this kind of other secular religion that was very tight knit. And she came home and he was molesting their daughter, and she beat him with this like pipe wrench, is what she said. And the judge ended up sentencing her to 15 years, and he didn't get any time for it. This was 20 years ago in a small town in a secular community. Very, very, very sad. And I kind of went through her journey for about 6 months with her, and I got a phone call from her daughter, and just out of the blue, I didn't know her daughter, and she said, "Hey, I just want to let you know, we just picked my mom up." And so her kids had stayed in touch with her the whole 15 years. And I was like, holy cow, it just brought me to tears. I was like, goodness gracious. And when I was on the phone with this woman, she said, Travis, I have all these courses and everything you've taught me. And I said to her, I said, I won't say her name, but I said, hey, I just want you to slow down. I want you to look at the next 20 years, right? You've lost so much. Like, let's just really put this into perspective. The goal now is to be present. The goal now isn't to pay bills. The goal now is to make sure that you're a mom and a grandmother. The goal now is not to try to figure out what you should have done the last 20 years. And so I love that depth of perspective that you shared. People are going through some real stuff, real heavy stuff. And so hopefully, this type of conversation, and anybody who's out there who wants, to talk to you, where can everybody find you on social and, email and website and all that fun stuff?
So my personal handle is Cory_Chipp. It's CHIPP. And my apparel company is Gold Elite Apparel and goldeliteapparel.com. And we are the world's best leggings. They are life-changing. We took away the front seam and I designed them. So they are made by women. So everything just sits right, sucks and tucks. They're amazing.
I can vouch for that. They are amazing. I have not worn them, but I have felt them. I have seen them. They're fantastic. So I hope you have nothing but incredible success. And I hope everybody out there, every man out there listening goes to your website and picks up a pair for his girls. And hopefully there's some girls out there who are entrepreneurs, who are struggling, who are going through some stuff and we're just literally searching for this. Nothing would make me happier than for you to receive a DM, in 3 weeks when this is out, of somebody that says, man, I just prayed for something like this. Like, that would just make my heart happy.
I would love that. And please reach out if you listen. Every podcast I listen to, I reach out and I tell them like what value. And so I would absolutely love that if you guys reached out.
You got it. I love it. Okay. Well, you've got some huge things on the horizon. We won't share them with the people now, but major department stores and very cool things coming up. So when you make it big and you're next to Nike, don't forget about us.
I definitely will. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
I loved it. Thank you so much. Have an awesome day.
You too.